December at 6:02. Staff, do we have a quorum?
Chair, we do have a quorum.
Just want to pause to make sure that we're online and recording. Housekeeping wise. Okay, thank you. And I don't have a need to use alternates tonight. Okay, our first item of business is to take action to approve the minutes for the August 27th, 2025 TAB meeting. Are there any corrections to the draft meeting minutes provided in the agenda? Okay, if there are no edits, opposed, no objections to approve the minutes as presented, I will proceed to consider the minutes approved as presented. Our next item of business is public comment. Staff, has anyone signed up for public comment tonight?
Sure, no one has signed up for public comment in person. I do see one person online, so I can see if they're interested. Brent Naylor, are you interested in providing public comment?
Okay, so just and they are no longer there. So, and we didn't get any written public comment. Okay, hearing public comment, we'll move on to regular business. Up first is the Issaquah Climate Action Plan update. Stacy Vin McKinstry, Sustainability Manager, will be presenting tonight. And if you're ready, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for making time on the agenda for this topic tonight. You are the first board or commission outside the environmental board that we're bringing the climate action plan update to. So it's a bit of a test on how we're meeting with each of those boards and going through some of the recommendations for updating the plan. Before launching into the work of the committees we've done, I did want to provide just a little bit of a background on the climate action plan, the progress we've been making, and then I'll talk about the process we're going through to update the plan. And really the intent of tonight is to get your input on some proposed early revisions to actions in the plan, most related to transportation. So I'll walk through the overview of the climate plan, the work we're doing on implementation, the update. I'm going to summarize the input that we received from the committee, and then we'll bring forward a number of actions and approach to the transportation section that we'd like your feedback on. We were talking a minute ago about possibly breaking out into a couple of groups. I'm wondering with Andrea and Brent online, that might make it a little bit more difficult, but we can talk about that when we get to that section. So just to start off with an overview of our city's climate action plan and implementation. Our climate action plan was adopted in December of 2021. We are well underway with implementation. The plan sets targets and identifies actions, both for reducing greenhouse gas emissions as well as preparing for the impacts of climate change. We have 6 focus areas, what we call focus areas, or groups of goals and targets and actions within the plan. Those are overarching actions that address areas such as education and outreach. We have a transportation land use section, natural systems and water resources, buildings and energy, materials and resources, and then community resilience and well-being. We have been actively implementing the plan since adoption with a small team. It was a 1-person team for the first year, and we've expanded to 2 people. And then we occasionally have fellows or interns that help out with our work. And then we work really closely across all the departments in the city to support implementation of the actions in the plan, as well as working with community partners and jurisdictions across the region to implement projects. We do have a public-facing dashboard where we report quarterly on progress that we're making in the plan. And within that dashboard, we are reporting that we have about 90% of our actions in the plan are complete. They are on track, meaning they're moving forward as expected, or they're in progress, maybe meaning that they're moving forward, maybe with some delays or unexpected challenges, but they are being advanced. We have a number of projects, programs, and policies that are actively being implemented both at the city and the community level. So just some examples of projects is for city operations. In the last 2 years, we've installed 19 electric vehicle chargers and transitioned a number of city vehicles to EVs. We've also worked with our facilities team to update heat and ventilation systems. They put in heat pumps in this building, for example. And we have 2 big solar installations happening this fall and winter. At the community level, we also have a number of programs, projects underway. We've been working with other entities such as PSE to get more electric vehicle charging in. We have a residential heat pump and solar program, and we work with community buildings to help them meet their state energy efficiency measures. We've also been very successful with grants, thanks mostly to the state and the state's Climate Commitment Act, which has helped fund a lot of our projects and programs. But that being said, we are making a lot of progress on our actions, but we are not advancing as fast as we need to with the targets in the Climate Action Plan. We're not advancing as fast as we need to in reducing our greenhouse gas emissions, for example, or energy efficiency in our buildings. So it is a great time to be updating our plan. We have kind of 4 years of experience under our belt. We have a good idea of what we need to be working on, particularly buildings and transportation. And so we are embarking on this update to the climate plan as was called out in the plan. So our approach to the plan update, we are calling it kind of a refresh or a light approach. We're not doing a complete overhaul of the plan, but we do know a number of areas that we want to make improvements on based on our experience with implementation over the last 4 years. We know that there's a number of sections in the plan that needed a deeper dive, and so we formed committees with subject matter experts. For instance, our natural systems and water resources section of the plan has a target around tree canopy, but none of the actions within that section related to tree canopy. The other section we wanted to focus in on was land use and transportation. Because of the update to Title 18, our land use code, a lot of those actions were complete, as well as with the update to the mobility action plan. We thought it was good to do a bit deeper dive. And then the other area of information that's really helping inform the plan is a number of our neighboring jurisdictions are undergoing plan updates. So there's a great opportunity to pull from them. Redmond, Bellevue, and King County are just completed their update or completing this fall. And then before we can launch it into actions and review, I did want to note one thing we're considering based on some review of other plans is possibly extending the life of the next plan. And that might be something to consider as we're looking at which actions we want to propose. So instead of a 5-year plan, maybe thinking about an 8 or 10-year plan that would have some regular check-ins. Let me actually pause there before I move into kind of diving right into the process and the proposals. Any questions kind of on climate action plan implementation, why we're doing an update or approach to the update?
Got a question. I'm going to ask for you to use our turn your name tag system. Also, Julian. Okay, go ahead.
You mentioned the 10-year time frame. Yeah. Is there a particular reason that we're thinking about doing 10-year versus shorter time frames?
Yeah, not. There have been some jurisdictions that have looked at more of a 10-year plan. I think we feel 5 years goes by really, really fast. And in general, we have a pretty good sense of what needs to be done in terms of reducing our emissions and preparing for climate change. So we don't necessarily think the types of actions or even our targets would change significantly if we were to look out at a longer time frame for implementation. Even at what we are calling a light update or a refresh of the plan takes a lot of staff work. We were really fortunate to have a grant to help with some of the earlier work on the update, but it's expensive. It takes a lot of staff time and it's taking time away from implementation of programs and projects. So just providing ourselves a little bit more time to focus on implementation before moving into another big update process would be beneficial. One thing we did talk to the environmental board about is if we do go to a longer time frame, we would be releasing more detailed work plans that would probably coincide with the city's budget process. We would include some triggers in the plan that if the landscape completely changed, it might lead us to do an update earlier, but we'd make sure there's some kind of protective measures in there that could possibly lead us to doing an earlier update. Those are some of the considerations. Yeah, I definitely welcome feedback on that tonight as well.
Adam?
Yeah, so climate action, Issaquah climate, these are pretty broad terms. Maybe to scope things for tonight, do you want to talk a little bit about the history of like, what is the scope of the Issaquah climate action plan? What are we trying to achieve? Who decided it? How did we get here?
Yeah.
And that'll kind of narrow in what we're looking at tonight.
Yeah, great question. 2021 was the city's first climate action plan. Prior to that, there was a sustainability department that was actively doing work around kind of general sustainability. So looking at policies and programs around buildings, and I'd expect probably working with transportation. I know they ran a residential solar campaign. So there was a lot of work already happening. There was a sustainable building policy, but there was not a plan really focused on greenhouse gas emissions. The city had signed on many years earlier to emission reduction targets that were developed jointly with King County and neighboring jurisdictions through a collaboration called the King County Cities Climate Collaboration, K4C. So we had made some commitments, but those weren't necessarily described in a city-specific plan. And this was prior to me starting, so I may not get all the facts right, but a lot of that kind of led to the buildup of the city wanting to have a plan that was really focused in on climate action and reducing our emissions in the areas we knew were most impactful, and really providing that roadmap for cities as well as community partners. A couple of years or 2 years building up to that plan development, the city held a number of listening sessions with the community to really get input, hear the priorities. And I think a lot of that was also the build up to plan development. At the same time, the environmental board was also forming and was tasked with helping with the implementation of the plan. So yeah, so our plan, I didn't cover really the targets or big overarching goals of the plans, but they align with those 6 focus areas that I described. So there's overarching targets for reducing emissions, there's targets around buildings, natural system, transportation, etc. That I can, more details that help a little bit set the stage.
One follow-on.
Yeah.
Since this was sort of formed in collaboration with other communities, other cities and county, what's the state of the ongoing collaboration?
Yeah, so the King County Cities Climate Collaboration, K4C, still exists as a very active group and still has targets that they work with all the communities to sign onto for reducing emissions. We have in the meantime formed another partnership with our East Side cities, and that partnership was formed to run joint programs together. So one of those is our heat pump program, for example. But those 6 cities are also holding each other very accountable for implementing plans. We're sharing ideas around policies or kind of big, bold actions we might take. So one city isn't standing alone with a policy or action that might seem a little controversial if it's just them, but we have kind of a network of cities that are also trying to advance some of those goals. But yeah, it has only grown since the city adopted the plan in 21 through those partnerships, regional partnerships.
Are we going to get an opportunity tonight to kind of have an overview of the goals that have been reached and which ones haven't?
Yeah, I didn't have that on the agenda, but I'm happy, maybe it'd be good to, I could provide kind of a follow-up write-up. We do have a very detailed report that went to council this summer. So I can make sure that Thomas has that to send it up. And then we're working on an update to that report that'll be a little bit more community facing, that'll be released in December, but that'll report out on target status and actions. I will say transportation related, we're actually, from our last inventory, we are in a good place in terms of meeting our targets for transportation, but we think a lot of that is still kind of COVID, residual COVID, a lot of people working from home. We are in the process of doing an updated inventory that'll look at 24 that might level set us a little bit.
Julian, did you still?
No, that was exactly my question about the status of the current inventory for both transportation and land use and the buildings, energy, and overarching climate actions. But I believe we already saw some updated numbers for the overall greenhouse gases emissions.
Yeah, so our last inventory is 2022. That covered both community emissions as well as city operations. The one we're working on right now is for 2024. The inventories lag quite a bit because we have to wait for data from PSE and other entities, but that will be released early in January. So we're looking forward to seeing 2024 because it'll be kind of a couple of years out of COVID and might give us a little bit more information of what's really happening.
I have a question is, I'm curious about, like our results and the things that actions that have been completed, how that feeds into the regional collaborations, like whether it's Eastside or the K4C. And then would some of the recommendations and questions, would that help with that process as well? Or is it's a bit more internal, like for the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're definitely trying to align actions and policies with what's being done at the county level as well as the regional, but we are our own unique jurisdictions. There's things actually we can do. We're a little bit more nimble being smaller, and there's a lot of things we can do compared to even a Bellevue and Redmond. So in some cases, we've been piloting some programs here that are Eastside collaboration then will kind of take the lessons learned and roll out more broadly. So yeah, I'd say wherever there's a new unique opportunity, especially around more the policy level, that's where we're really thinking we're going to need to lean a little bit heavier in this plan update. But yeah, there's a lot of kind of back and forth learning and exchanging.
Otherwise, we can transition to, or you can, I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I'll dig in a little deeper. And I'll say, just get a little to your comment too. This can be a first conversation. So if you all feel like we needed a little bit overview before diving in deep, I am happy to come back. I think there may be some back and forth between taking your feedback to the environmental board, coming back. So definitely this doesn't have to be the only conversation and only touch point if we want to get deeper. Right, so just moving into the committee approach. So again, we've formed these committees around a couple of focus areas that we felt really needed a deeper dive, and the land use and transportation section was one of those. We had members of the environmental board as well as representatives from other boards and commissions. Adam and Julian were on. committee, and I'll have them speak in a moment about their experience. And the Snoqualmie tribe was also engaged in the Natural Systems Committee. Those groups met twice in the spring and then early summer, and really looked at the goals and objectives that they wanted to come out of these discussions on this section of the climate plan. They reviewed the current actions. They looked at actions being proposed in other cities or that have been recently adopted in other city plans. And then they provided recommendations back to staff. This is just a snapshot of the committee members that we had for both of those meetings. And then I thought what I would do briefly is just provide a high level summary of the feedback that we heard around transportation, and then I'll turn it over to Adam if you guys have comments you want to make. And then after the general feedback, what we'll do is move into some more specific questions that we wanted feedback on. And if we think it will work, we can try breakout groups. But we can talk about that in just a moment. So in general, the feedback we heard from the committee around transportation was really wanting to develop a deeper link between transportation and land use, more denser growth, more mixed use development. We probably won't touch on that too much tonight, but that's a conversation we'll have with you all and PPC over the coming months. There were a lot of concerns around transit and King County Metro's process, where they're not going to develop, extend their transit before we grow, but we also can't grow without the transit available. And so just there was a bit of a recognition around increased transit may need to follow growth, but there needs to be some consideration for short-term solutions if we're waiting for the transit to come. There was a lot of interest on focusing on transit access, even considering parking limits to encourage more use of transit. There was, we'll get to this in a minute, but there was some concern around redundancy of actions in the various plans and the need to more streamline implementation efforts. And then the committee really expressed a strong support for expanding bike and e-bike infrastructure, needing to help engage the community to improve bike adoption, and really ensuring that the city is thinking long-term about how we improve biking infrastructure. And then one of the final areas they touched on was around electric vehicle charging infrastructure, really wanting to see an increased implementation in multifamily dwellings, and that there's a role for the city to help move that forward, also in collaboration with Puget Sound Energy and ensuring that there's enough electrical capacity to meet the demands. So that's kind of just a high overarching summary. I know it was 4 months ago, but if our committee reps have things they want to add or just share anything about the process.
Okay. So it was April and June. We had a couple of online meetings. It was about, I don't know, a few hours total of discussing with. Stacy mentioned several of the big items that we discussed. There were other things that kind of we didn't really have time to go deeper on a lot of things. I'm sure any of these types of committees, you can go as deep as you like and get all sorts of ideas on it. One of the things I really like about the Climate Action Plan is that it's very specific in how it's measured, certainly relative to a lot of Issaquah's plans. So the greenhouse gas inventory, great place to start. It also talks a lot about like vehicle miles traveled and kilowatt hours used and things that are very measurable, so we can track that over time. There's always room for improvement on this, so we did talk a little bit about that, and I think maybe in future years, it would be nice to continue to make that even more objective as to how everything in the plan relates to improving the metrics and prioritization among them and all that. So I won't go too deep into like specifics that, we didn't cover or we didn't get deep enough into. But we did kind of have a mostly brainstorm session. And so I think Julian and I are seeing a lot of the current form of the recommendations kind of meet tonight along with you all.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the topics we kind of thought about, I think it was mainly, transit access and transit-related issues, but also EVs and kind of looking at not just the parking, but also how do we balance or how do we kind of put that into the climate action plan, right? Of do we want to make the parking slots actually ready for just ready, or do we want to have them to be like armed with the chargers? And so we had a pretty robust discussion there. I still remember that. And so, yeah, I think that was one of the main things that we were talking about when it came to EVs of like, do we want them to just be wired up, or do we want them to actually have the chargers in the parking areas as well? And then, yeah, I think parking just in general was a big big point that we were making of, relating to transit, relating to bikes, relating to other forms of transportation, and how we can better manage land use for transportation. So that's what I remember.
Cynthia?
I was just wondering if you could summarize the discussion on parking. Are you talking primarily about requiring less parking for developments, or what was the nature of that discussion around parking?
By my memory, it was about like the EV parking.
Oh, like
A
primarily
lot of it
parking.
was about EV parking of like, do we want to have parking stalls to be wired for like ready?
Signing
Was there
parking
no-
spots for EV chargers, you mean?
Or do we want to have actual EV chargers in those stalls? So like I know some of the standards are like 10% of the stalls need to be
Got it.
ready, and then
Wasn't related
another 10%.
To
Yeah.
what would end up in Title 18, which is like parking spaces for, that wasn't.
That did come up as
Oh,
well, just
okay.
limiting parking, I think especially in central Issaquah.
I
Or
think
the
so.
lowering
Yeah.
requirements.
I think I personally brought up parking maximums and near transit centers. Not sure.
Seems like a good place to start, at least just lowering requirements.
I can speak on that for a moment. So our last legislative session ended, I think, in April. Yeah, you would know. That led to lots of parking related statewide. So we recently updated our land use code, specifically in the parking section. Not only was it related to I think it's like no parking minimums within basically central Issaquah for housing related land uses. We also, for the longest time, had a parking structure requirement in central Issaquah for housing related uses. But new state law said you can't require any sort of structured parking. So no garages, no structured, I guess that's also a garage, anything that houses a vehicle for housing related uses. So that was part of it. We also were responding to another state mandate to, I'm gonna get it wrong, but there's 4 different levels of electric vehicle readiness, and it was adding the most minimum, which is basically the conduit in the wall, but not not the receptacle. Yeah.
People, I think it's called
Right,
EV people.
right.
Or do you have to leave it open?
I have to leave it
Okay.
open. Yeah, I know.
Okay,
I can try to.
it's okay.
Yeah. It's just a record. Yeah.
Well, my question was about the thought process behind incentivizing e-bikes and then what charging would look like practically for that.
Yeah, from the that the
Yeah.
committee recommended, yeah, and happy to get into that discussion. I think that's one of the, there's some new actions proposed around that. But I think there was a lot of interest in just creating more opportunities for folks to be bike commuting or biking to school. Given that we live in a really hilly city, there's a lot of interest in e-bikes and offering incentives to make sure that no matter the household's income, that folks have access to e-bikes. For charging infrastructure, I don't remember if that, I'll have to look back at the recommendations. I'm not sure how much that came up for e-bikes, given that a lot of the commuting would probably be within the city for that, but that's something I can make a note of, and we can make sure to capture that if, when we get to some of those actions that relate to it.
As an aside, I was at the library and I saw somebody had connected their e-bike to an electric vehicle charging unit. There's an adapter that I guess you can purchase. And this was new for me. I didn't know that that existed, but the market will find use for it. So that, I think that's sort of one way that that sort of solves itself.
That would be a great topic we could talk about in a minute when we look at that action, whether it's not you had concerns about it or just wanting to make sure that there's also charging infrastructure.
Yeah, I think we did mention, or at least it was brought up. Not sure if we came to a consensus about it, but I think that was brought up.
That's pretty cool.
Lemire, go ahead.
I had a question for Thomas, kind of elaborating on, you mentioned some kind of a state decision. Could you just, I wasn't aware of this. Could you just like briefly discuss the state decision with parking and?
Sure. There's a couple state decisions, but the one, again, I think it was House Bill 1181, and that was related to like, I think they called that like the TOD, the Transit Oriented Development Bill. And it was just, it was addressing lots of like little issues that prevent housing from being built. So like the example was like parking is a big hurdle. It represents like 15 to 20% of like the cost of building a house. So they're trying to like have that not as a automatic requirement. It's not to say that you can't have it, but like we're saying that you don't need it if it's near like like the transit center, for example. Some of the other stuff was like you can allow gravel, like a gravel lot can also serve as your required parking up to like some amount. So it's basically saying like, if you already have like a place where somebody could park, like just like let that be it. Like you don't need to like pave it and like stencil it out if it's an apartment building or whatever. Like that could just add cost that maybe you could just like not do that, and then that cost wouldn't be passed on to like the purchaser. So just like all these little things, there's like 7 or 8 different things that kind of add cost to building housing. So they're kind of addressing all those at once.
Yeah, to follow up to that, is Issaquah only doing what is required by that bill, or are we trying to do things on top of that to enable further development?
We have other stuff, but this last round was just sort of responding directly to state requirements. Okay. Yeah.
Just a quick aside while we're on the topic here. I'll probably talk about this later, but there are some things that municipalities, local governments do that also make housing slower to develop, and that includes deviating from state requirements. And so this is something where if we want to do more than what the state does, we could actually have an unintended side effect as housing developed, which could increase vehicle miles traveled, for example. So hopefully we'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about going beyond the state requirements for EV compatibility.
Right. Okay, well, what we wanted to jump into next was, first topic was just to get some general feedback on some of the priorities identified by the committee, general input reactions based on review of the draft actions. Then we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the proposed new actions. I believe there's 4 of them. And then the third topic for tonight was just to talk a little bit about the redundancy issue, and I'll provide a little bit more about that, but kind of how do we address actions that exist in the climate plan as well as the mobility action plan or other. So we were just talking about the meeting about potentially breaking into two groups. I'm wondering with Andrea and Brent, if that might just be hard to do, and if we should just stay as one group.
I mean, those folks aren't members of the TAB, so it's, yeah, it's, that's not.
Andrea says no problem
No
for me.
problem. Okay, and Brent, you haven't heard from? Okay, well, let's test this out. I was just telling Erica, last week we tried out breakout groups with the environmental board just to give folks a little bit more space to think through and have a smaller discussion before we come back as a group. So what I'll do is kind of introduce, we'll break out into groups. I can introduce the topics, the 3 topics maybe while we're recording. And then what we did last week was we paused the recording while they were discussing, and then we'll come back and report out from the groups and then move into a little bit of a discussion. Yes, we will do that. And make sure that that's caught on the recording. So why don't I go through real quick just to make sure it is captured what we'll talk about. We'll break into the groups. I can bring back up the slide as a reminder, and then we'll come back out. All right. So the first one is just hearing kind of any initial reactions, kind of more of a general feedback, reactions to the committee, priorities, reactions to what you're seeing in the document, as well as any priorities that you have or areas you want to make sure that we deep dive into at some point in the plan, whether that's parking or electric bike charging. So not getting too deep into actions, but kind of more general reaction and feedback. And then the next topic will be digging into the new actions that came out of the committee discussion. There are four of them. Increased use of and access to bikes. Oh, and we did have charging there. So that topic, prioritizing incentives to encourage adoption of e-bikes, incentives and technical assistance for EV charging, specifically in multifamily and building out that action. And then considering exceeding state requirements for EV charging, particularly around kind of the readiness, what Thomas was describing. And then that third topic was around redundancy. So we have actions that live in the climate plan. Very similar version also lives in the mobility action plan. That can be challenging, especially if the language is slightly different or they're on different update schedules. And so wanted some input. Is that okay? Do we need to make sure the language is the same? Should we identify one plan as kind of being the one we look to on that action, even if the language changes in the others, but just kind of want that feedback, especially because of the close overlap with a lot of the actions in the mobility action plan. With that, we can maybe pause and just maybe just split. Yeah, if folks don't mind dragging chairs, and we'll spend 5 minutes on each topic, and then y'all can identify someone to come back and summarize. That would be great. You all Well, thank you for trying the breakout groups. Hopefully that kind of helps just being in a smaller group for the conversation. So we'll just go kind of group by group, maybe share out. Actually, why don't we go topic by topic? So maybe we'll start with the general feedback and hear from each group. So then that way we can go into a little bit more discussion on each of the topics. So about 20 minutes. So why don't we start with general feedback? If you want to start, and then Adam, were you doing notes for the other group?
Yes.
Okay, so why don't we start on general feedback, thoughts, priorities? Or sorry, Erica was.
I was taking notes,
Okay.
but we didn't really get into the general feedback. We pretty much dove directly right into the.
That's true.
Okay.
into the new
That's true.
goals.
We
So-
went to specifics.
Okay,
So,
that
yes.
sounds great. Any reflections on the general feedback from the group, and then we can talk a bit.
I will
as a
say one
broader
thing
group.
that did come up with ours that didn't necessarily go into the other sections was like just addressing the safety aspect of bikes or safety
Oh, yeah.
concerns, right? That's something that I think we've noticed in the community.
Yeah, so I had a couple of things that we talked about in the general feedback section, which may or may not be general feedback, but that's okay. We're going to talk about it anyway. One was expressing interest in understanding the requirement between parking changes and the metrics that we track. So one of the metrics that I don't know if it's in the ICAP as much, but might be of interest would be like number of cars per household. So we talked a little bit about that. And then of course, VMT is all over the place in the map and at least it used to be in the ICAP. Maybe we removed that for redundancy. But looking at those metrics and the actual impact of changes to parking, how do we track those over time? Should that be something that's more in the ICAP plans for tracking it, for example? And then the other discussion we had was on for new developments, where we were talking about bike networks and other multimodal. Is there enough support for shared paths or dedicated bike lanes? And should that show up in the climate plan just to make sure that, I guess, we're being effective in listing the priorities so that we complete the story there.
Right. Why don't we then dig into anything else, sorry, from that group that you wanted to
The
share?
safety.
Safety?
Was that in this section or a different section?
Safety of e-bikes or safety of
Safety of-
shared paths?
Of Derek's friends terrorizing the city.
That one was specific.
Okay, sorry.
Great.
I lost track.
All right, why don't we then dig into feedback on the proposed new actions? Do you all want to start?
So my notes from our discussion was, we appreciate the first point on the bikes, encouraging use and access to them, and improving bike parking and charging. But we particularly were looking at the language, and we didn't particularly find residential e-bike chargers or residential e-bike chargers. So if there's a secure room for e-bikes or like bikes, there should be a place where people can plug in their battery or plug in their bike. That's
Multifamily in particular?
for multifamily.
great.
Yeah. Because some bikes will be able to take off remove the battery. Some bikes you won't be able to, and so they will have to stay in the secure room. So that was the main thing that we were talking about when it came to bike charging on that first goal. In terms of the other ones, and that kind of fits as the second one as well, in terms of incentives. And then for the EV charging, just as a general comment over these new goals was like, it'd be nice to have fewer parking requirements in general. And leaning into the parking maxims in particular, but getting rid of the parking minimums and making it more market-based when it comes to parking provision. We were really emphasizing ensuring secure parking stations for bikes, and then we were talking about how much it costs to put in the EV chargers when it's ready-made, just in terms of like thinking about, do we want to actually turn the, EV charging as a mandate rather than incentives? We were talking about in kind of the sense of, whatever is disincentivizing or whatever is incentivizing people to move away from gas cars is ideal. And then we were talking about how public spaces, EV chargers are very well utilized, like the Issaquah Community Center, and so leaning into that as well, some more. And yeah, I mean, we were kind of leaning more towards the mandate for EV chargers within residential buildings for like economies of scale and other reasons as well. So those were the main things that we covered for the new actions. But if you guys want to add anything else, I hope I captured our discussion.
Sounds good.
We had two primary topics that we covered in the new actions. One was e-bikes, and specifically the potential conflict between what we all have anecdotes of people basically abusing electric dirt bikes and kind of things that maybe you don't want to be classified as e-bikes, and then incentivizing e-bikes. So in particular, there is an enforcement problem. We've probably all seen it. There are lots of problems that could lead to the public saying, hey, we don't want e-bikes here. Medina, I think, recently banned e-bikes. Did I get that right?
Really? Sounds like them.
I think, yeah, so, we want to incentivize e-bikes for climate reasons, which is great. If the public doesn't see that there's a good separation and a good culture around e-bikes, we potentially have a problem that's going to prevent us being successful there. So it's a question of like, how do we build the right culture around e-bikes so that people use them safely, ways that lead to the outcomes that we want. You can ask Derek about his acquaintances that have some interesting habits around.
Tying it to like enforcement of like the laws makes more sense.
Maybe it's enforcement that needs to do that if that's going to be effective.
Yeah.
Maybe it's kind of build a e-bike culture. But anything that we incentivize around e-bikes, we probably need to think about how the public sees that from the perspective of people that are abusing public spaces. The other thing we talked about was exceeding state building code requirements. Not that this is necessarily a bad thing, but there is a potential unintended consequence of not getting starter home development because of complexity in building codes in Issaquah. There's the state commissioned a report on building out a plan to develop scalable starter homes. And one of the findings of that was that developers are choosing not to build starter homes because of the complexities around site-specific requirements, which often lead after spending tens of thousands of dollars on evaluating whether it's possible. So given that, I think we're basing this on what Redmond has done. I mean, there's potential that we can measure what they've done, whether that's disincentivized any development, and also piggyback on it to either, not be unique in the way that we do our building codes, or work with Redmond to get that as a state requirement in order to simplify building codes across the state. Did I miss anything?
I mean, I think actually we'll go to the next one, then we'll talk about,
All right, redundancy.
So with redundancy, we were saying that, while we can streamline things, it feels kind of wrong to remove references to the map, mobility action plan. And because TAB has had so many touches on mobility action plan, it's just not ideal to kind of remove transportation related topics from the climate action plan, just because transportation is a huge part of the emissions portfolio here, and greenhouse gases emissions portfolio here in the city, and looking at some of the climate progress, metrics progress is least met in transportation. And so we think it's important to preserve as many references as possible within the climate action plan. But there is some nuance that we're talking about. The big umbrella actions should definitely stay in. So that would be like 1.1, 2.1, and 2.3. Those are things like incentivize dense mixed use and transit-oriented development. 2.1 has to do with implementing the mobility action plan. And then 2.3 is advocate and partner regionally to improve transit network. We think these are pretty broad items to think about that should definitely stay in, and they're not so granular. We will say that doing more granular items, so 2.2 and 2.4, those are much more specific, and we believe that those can be just referenced by policy crosswalk or whatever tool there is. So just referencing it within the mobility action plan. But yeah, 1.1, 2.1, 2.3 should definitely stay in as much as we can. And the justification for this is basically saying there's always some level of redundancy in government, and within transportation, I think that's the working life. Like, you need to have redundancy in transportation. That's how transportation planners think, especially when it comes to transits. You always want to have two ways to get somewhere. As long as they're not in opposition with each other, it's okay to have that redundancy. And then having the same goals across departments is a good thing. If we're prioritizing that goal. And then of course there's the issue of policy visibility, and if we're making something less visible, that means we're deprioritizing it just in the public space. And then we were really curious and interested in learning more about Snoqualmie Tribe had to say about this as well. So I'd appreciate hearing more about that. And then of course, more opinions from staff about this whole thing as well. So, yeah.
I can just speak to the tribe's comments real quick. Erica had a similar question. I think it was mostly around if an action previously existed in two plans, it's removed from the climate plan, but it has an important climate element. And then we kind of lose control of that action and its relationship to climate mitigation or resilience. And the intent of it may change in that other plan in the future. And so then it's that loss connection. So with a lot of the cities they've been working with, they've been encouraging that redundancy.
Yeah. And what Erica was saying was basically, if we're serious about equity, then we need to have tribal consultation as a central piece of everything to this. They were the original stewards of the land, and we need to really take their views into account. Central account.
Yeah, so on our side, we got a lot of similar ideas. In general, we thought it was okay to have some redundancy in there because of the priorities of the different plans being a little bit different. The core goals are different, and so making sure that those are covered is certainly reasonable. That said, it's also easier to update these and keep the documents relevant when they are normalized, normalization being kind of the opposite of redundancy in this case. So we thought that, action by action, the decision might vary as to whether we need redundancy or not. So I appreciate Julian going into more specifics on, what might be covered. We didn't get to the point of being able to provide specific feedback on each action and how that should be normalized. I also think that there's a bit of a middle ground here. So it's not just do you eliminate or do you include it. A middle ground option might be, for example, in in the climate plan for something that is really, the actions taken are in the transportation space, but there's still an incentive to do them from climate action plan. You might, for example, say that the climate action plan includes, what did I say here? Advocate for ICAP priorities in MAP updates or MAP updates, excuse me, Thomas. So those sorts of advocacy things, or really tying the action to things that people working in climate space would actually be doing rather than building roads or whatever. Yeah, that's okay. Try to represent it that way instead.
Okay, that was fantastic feedback. I'm trying to remember what I had in my next slides. So just as a quick summary, there are definitely a few questions around going to understand parking requirements, impacts on metrics, interest in looking at bike networks and multimodal requirements with new developments, questions around safety, maybe education, ensuring that there's compliance with state and city laws around e-bikes. A lot of interest on increasing requirements for multifamily e-bike charging in secure spaces. Again, kind of that reduced parking requirements, maybe looking at removing minimums or having it more market-based. Considerations for EV charging requirements, kind of maybe see what happens with Redmond and any impact that they're seeing with development, but there could also be this approach where maybe we're doing more advocacy at the state level to put those requirements in statewide, so we're not being negatively impacted from development by having stricter requirements. And then in terms of redundancy, definitely am hearing keeping some of those bigger overarching actions, but possibly going one by one and maybe reviewing whether or not we could remove them from the ICAP or at least take more of kind of the climate lens. I really like that suggestion where maybe it's that climate advocacy aspect of the action, but then the implementation lives in the MAP. So what we will do next is take all the amazing feedback from tonight. We're going to compile that into kind of another version of this and talk with the environmental board in November. And then I'm thinking we're going to want another touch point at some point. We can talk with the chair and vice chair about that, but possibly meeting with you all again early in 26 after we work through some of these actions a little bit more. And particularly if there's any policies that are kind of rising to the top that we think we want to move forward in the plan, maybe honing in on discussion on those. That sounds good, but I'll confer with Andrea and Thomas and the chair and vice chair and look at that next touch point. But I think it'd be great to talk with you all again and get some question.
Well, I just had a comment about what was being brought up about going like the state requirements and going beyond the state requirements. I think they're, from my view, it's good to be ahead of the game in some senses and kind of be the regulatory leader in certain aspects, especially when it comes to sustainability and sustainable practices. And I think there is a benefit to actually being ahead of the game, in the region and in the state. And we can adapt certain practices, and then other cities, other counties, the whole state will follow. And I think there's an advantage to doing it like that. So, just my opinion, but yeah.
Yeah, I think, and we may be proposing a lot of new policies in the ICAP, and some of the language we're looking at using, Bellevue's also using, is kind of assess the feasibility and implementation pathways. So we have an out if we decide that policy isn't working in Redmond, for example, requirement or for some other reason. So I think if there's a eagerness to kind of, or interest in getting ahead, being a leader in this space, and we want to advance policies, but we're also not, there may be some unintended consequences, or we really need to evaluate the impact still. There's some language we can include in the climate plan to provide ourselves.
And this is the structure of the country of like decentralized,
Yes.
quote unquote decentralized, and little towns of little spots of democracy.
Yeah. Yes. Great. Well, one other follow-up item is I will send you the ICAP report, Thomas, to share from the summer, and then we'll have a updated, more community-facing version of kind of our progress report in December. And then I will also let you know how the conversation on this topic goes with the Vermont board, and see you all early in the new year for another. Thanks for letting me take up a lot of your meeting today. You guys have one other topic to do.
Okay, Stacy, I guess both of you got what you needed?
Absolutely. Yes, that was fantastic. And I also always welcome additional feedback. If you all go away and are looking at the document, have other thoughts, reflections, feel free to pass this on. You're welcome to the case if you want.
Okay, our next agenda item. My personal next agenda item is for you guys to pass around the muffins. Okay, chair power. All right, so we are moving on to our chair and vice chair elections. I'm just gonna keep running through the script, Thomas, unless you, okay. The following process will be used to elect chair and vice chair. I will call for nominations. When all nominations have been made, I will close the nominations. If only one nomination is made, the member is considered elected by unanimous consent. If multiple nominations are made, then board members will have the opportunity to discuss the nominees. I will then ask board members to cast votes in the order they were nominated by a roll call vote. You can only vote for one nominee for office. You can vote for yourself. The first board member receiving a majority vote is elected to the position, and then we'll repeat that process for the vice chair. Any questions on that? I've done this before. Chair election, let's get started. Are there any nominations for the tab chair? Julian?
I'll nominate Erica.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I do think before I close this, and I maybe should have shared this before, but some of you know this and not everyone does, but so my day job is I work for the state legislature, and during session, I do physically work from Olympia during the week, which means that I can't make it back here in time for TAB meetings, so I join via Teams. But due to our bylaws that we recently just reviewed, that means that functionally, whoever the vice chair is will be the chair, since I can't chair from Teams. So I want you to make sure you're having like a fully informed vote, or vote by acclamation. But yeah, so I guess.
The current vice chair is aware of the situation. Minimal. Should.
I'm going to nominate Adam for chair.
Thank you. I'm getting there. We have to, are we done with the?
Chair.
You said
Oh,
chair.
chair.
Yeah.
Chair, excuse me.
Do you accept the nomination? Does he have to accept it?
So I said, thank you for your nominations. Since we received more than one, we'll now discuss the nominees. Discussion.
So now we have to accept it.
Give nominee Red Jack or.
Well, if you don't want to be chair.
Yeah, if you don't want
I
to,
think
yeah.
Erica's been doing a great job. And I think that's, from my perspective, Erica can continue to be chair for the next.
I guess I can also discuss. So when we were talking about the potentials of this, I more than willing, we talked about this, that if you all felt that better. I won't take that, it doesn't matter, but I wouldn't take that personally if it was decided to, you know, the vice chair would be the functional chair for January and February. I will be back in March, so 2 months. And then this chair term is, Thomas, I might get this wrong, through September.
Through September.
Yes, so that would mean that, so to keep that, I get the term in mind as well. So, but this is a democratic process.
I just wanted to open that up for discussion as a potential in case people thought it'd be better to have the chair be available at all meetings. I don't really.
Yeah, this is for the first 3 meetings or 2 meetings?
2 meetings.
I mean, I feel like, I feel like it's okay for, like, everyone as their wise. It's okay to be absent at a couple of meetings.
I think that's
Yeah.
fine.
Okay,
Yeah, and like
Yeah,
I've chaired before as a vice chair, and
if you two,
we are generally good about communicating ahead of time about who's doing what.
I think you two have been doing a good job, and if you two prefer the chair, vice chair arrangement, I don't have any problems with that.
I prefer the current arrangement.
Okay.
okay. So technically, I think there are 2 nominations. Do you withdraw?
Yeah, I'll withdraw.
This is a little weird to ask as the current chair, knowing what's going on. We're all witnessing this and, okay.
You're doing
Okay.
great.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
Rough script now.
I am. Okay, so I'm hearing 1 nomination from the floor for Erica Boyd. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, the nominations are closed. Okay, so Erica, you have been elected as chair through September of 2026. Congratulations. Thanks, guys. Okay, now we move on to vice chair. Are there nominations for vice chair?
I nominate Adam.
Thank you. I accept.
Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations are closed. Adam, you have been elected as vice chair through September of 2026. Thank you all for participating in the democratic process. The next item on the agenda is reports.
Yeah, that's me. So just wanted to mention 2 things. First, I do apologize about the calendar invites. Let me make it clear, there is no meeting in November, and we'll see you in December. And we'll be meeting here, and I believe it's on the 19th.
17th or 19th?
Let me check. It's the 17th, let me check. Yeah. It is the 17th.
Okay. Good.
And you said here in Gibson.
It's at Gibson. The reason why we moved it to Gibson on the 17th is because there were multiple boards meeting at Tibbetts, and we moved it outside of the holiday. Second thing I wanted to mention, and I sent this in email. So Sound Transit is looking for public feedback on their proposal. And this would be to do a service change in fall of 26. I can just share my screen. I wanted to just share with you the map that they're. So, we have 2 express buses in Issaquah. We have 556 and we have the 554. So this change that they're proposing would basically add a lot of bus stops along Gilman specifically, and then it's basically in like central Issaquah and Old Town. So it's something that we've been advocating for since I've been here 3.5 years. So this is very exciting to have like 15-minute bus in central. That is the benefit of this plan. The negative is that basically when the 2 line opens across the bridge, our 554 bus would go away. And so they're going to completely remove the 554 and then just kind of update the 556. So anybody wanting to go into Seattle specifically would have to transfer from the bus at South Bellevue, and then they'd have to take the light rail. So the negative is that it's not like a one-seat transit ride anymore, but the benefit is that our local transit is slightly better. So there's definitely some pros and cons. We were told many years ago that the 554 was going to continue, so we thought that it was going to be like a Mercer Island straight to Seattle kind of connection, but now it's like kind of backtracking a little bit. So it will add additional time to anybody trying to get into Seattle. So that's kind of unfortunate about that. But overall, it adds a lot of value, but also kind of like adds some gaps to our network. So it's something to consider. And so, yeah, if you have any comments, there's a feedback form. I know Adam has taken it. I've taken it personally. I think we've both seen that the form is a little bit clunky and it doesn't give you a great way to provide like all the comments you'd probably want to provide.
I hit other for everything so I could type.
Yep. Good idea.
Yeah, I think it's also possible that the website has other forms that there's like a direct contact service changes at soundtransit.org. So that might be like another option. Let them know what you think.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have received multiple public engagements from people who know that I like to talk about buses. They have asked me what the city of Issaquah, like the survey is for like the public, right? But if Sound Transit has asked for Issaquah's feedback on this, or if you guys have any say in this.
So there's a working group for what's called Eastlink Connections. City staff have been involved in that the last several years. Also, one second, I need to charge my computer. It's about to die. Just keep talking though. City staff have been involved in that process for many years. We've been providing comment regularly. When this was announced, that was the first time that we saw it. So Sun Transit does reach out to us often, but this latest round was kind of a surprise. We knew generally what the idea was, but the details that were provided, a lot of it was new to us. Yeah. We do chat with them regularly. I'm actually chatting with them on Friday, so it's going to be a topic that we bring up. But we tend to meet with them, I would say like every 2 weeks or so.
I like the benefits, but also I think about things from a disability lens. Transfers are really hard for some people with level disabilities, and I don't love that that's not a one shot anymore.
Thomas, is it for public? Is there any conflict from me being part of Sound Transit to fill that form?
I would say, so is the question about whether or not you can share the form or?
To fill it in or?
Yeah, I mean, you could fill it in, I would imagine, as an individual.
Okay.
Yeah, it is anonymous, so it's not like you're not giving your position is not any different than anybody else's.
Okay.
In that sense. Yeah, I think it asks for your
There's some like
your zip
demographic
code.
identifiers.
Yeah.
It asks for zip code
And your age, I think that's like,
yeah.
Oh, and how often you ride the bus.
Right. Yeah.
I had a procedural question. So are we going to be meeting here regularly, or is it just next meeting?
Just next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, because with 2 meetings in a row, I wasn't sure if this was a permanent change.
Yeah. Let me speak to that. So there were this year in particular, the holiday schedule was like pretty challenging, mostly because there's so many boards and commissions. There's really only like 3 rooms that we can meet. So this is a late breaking option for future meetings. And you can smell like when I walked in today, the paint was still fresh. So this is now an option for meeting, where it wasn't before when I was initially scheduling these out in January. So all that to say, it's possible that we meet here in the future, but we're going to try to stick to Tibbetts because that's like our go-to spot. But yeah.
This is quite a convenient location.
This is
Yeah,
more convenient.
I was gonna say, this is way more convenient.
It's more convenient for you too.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I do walk them.
I
I was
don't
gonna
want to
say.
speak out of turn, but I can.
I like to walk.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. Yeah, I will chat about this being an option in the future, but I suspect maybe not. Yeah. This was for many years like the Kiwanis clubhouse. I think it's still being used by many different groups, so scheduling is quite challenging for this. It's also very nice. But yeah, I'll definitely ask about it. Yeah.
I don't know what's behind that.
Well, it's like it used to be where the chairs were all kept.
Yeah, that's where the chairs, the
This
tables.
is much nicer than the last time I was in here, so well done.
There's also some exercise bikes back there, like some spinning bikes.
That's fun.
Sounds like a town type meeting. We'll all get on exercise bikes.
The opposite
Or
of
cycling.
going anywhere.
Advocacy. Oh, that's right.
15 minutes left. I'll go back.
That's all I got.
That's all you,
Yep.
okay. All right, chair report. I guess this is a little off the cuff and unorthodox, but it sounds like we do have a lot of strong opinions about the 554 change. I'm gonna put you on the spot a bit here, but is there any precedent for if we had like a unified opinion, which I'm not sure that we do, on writing a unified tab letter? Is that maybe not so, because we're a few layers back behind you, that seems like more of a council action. You don't have to answer this right now.
Yeah.
It's
Let
percolating in
me
my
run
brain.
it up the flagpole.
Okay.
Yeah.
We don't, I don't even know if we have any kind of,
At the very least, it would be nice to have some kind of a tab, just an official tab discussion of that, if that's at all possible.
Yeah, so I will say that the comment period closes on November 7th. Yeah, frankly, I don't know how much say we have in the matter. It is a regional agency. However, individually, it does speak volumes if there's a lot of folks that use the survey and send individual comments. The Sound Transit Board does look at those things. And yeah, the city, we ultimately, like we see a lot of benefit in what they're doing from the local standpoint. But yeah, in both scenarios, there wasn't going to be like a one seat to Seattle. Sound Transit has specified specifically that they were taking away buses that were considered redundant with other services unless there was like a time savings, which they didn't find with like the 550.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that'll be very nice to go on the I-90 bridge on the train and just skip by all the cars. And sometimes the bus gets stuck up in that traffic too.
Yeah.
So,
I'm just saying, once you do make the transfer.
yeah, once we do make, yeah, especially across the I-90, and then of course, the light rail will go straight into downtown, like pretty much underground. That'll be extremely nice. So skip all of the routing through downtown and everything. So
maybe I'll just ask for a future staff report on updating how the conversations are going. Or it sounds like you're meeting with them tomorrow, Friday, tomorrow, or.
Yeah, we meet with them for various reasons. This next one is related to like Central Issaquah light rail planning, but this is which is like obviously a long-term discussion. But we do chat with them just like regularly on like operational type things.
As we were updating the MAP, we talked a lot about how a lot of the transit stuff is advocacy rather than action by the city, rather than direct action. Advocacy is still an action, but maybe it makes sense to get an update for the tab on, what are the processes around advocating for that, so that we understand that a little bit better, and any updates to the specific actions we take around advocacy.
Sounds like a much better than I out of the gate. Let's write a letter. So
You got started.
okay, chair report. I have nothing to report other than ballots should be in your mailboxes if you vote, and please vote by November 4th. Other business and announcements. The good of the order. Seeing none, we are adjourned at 7:49. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for the muffins. Did you make them? So where did